IAS interview is a common name we call, the common parlance. It's actually a personality test for civil services. Why it is not an interview is that this is not meant to assess your knowledge of the subject which you might have studied or which was your optional subject in the written examination. The written examination is held only to assess your basic mental ability to absorb new things, to understand new things, to make an assessment of whatever situation you are placed in, to assess the other people you are engaged with, that is, people who are your colleagues, your superiors, your subordinates, your friends, the people with whom you are interacting. In civil service or in IPS, for example, you may be dealing with a lot of people who are part of a mob. And you can't say that the board will always make the correct assessment. Board can make mistakes. And now I will come back to this point, but I'll briefly explain how the interview system has evolved so that you can understand this a little better. Originally, that was before I or my brother entered service or went for interview. There was a time in the beginning of the independent India when IAS was started and other civil services were started. Of course, these had their own predecessors like ICS and IP and all that. But then the Indian name was added, or rather, Indian was also there early in civil service. But then, basically, after India became independent, in the early stages, it was necessary that you have to pass the interview, however much you score in the written examination. Even if you are 100% marks in the written examination, if you failed in the interview, you would not be qualified for the service. That was the rule in the beginning. This led to a lot of complaints. Justified or unjustified, I can't say, but long before, maybe when I was in school or college, there were complaints that this was leading to a lot of good candidates being left out. So they evolved a system whereby the interview is just one part of the whole recruitment process, selection process. At the time when we were appearing for interview, there were two different examinations. So examination was the same, but two additional papers for IAS and IFS, which has then and now slightly higher scale of pay. And in fact, at the higher levels, so far the insistence has been that in every other service, the promotion to the same level will be 2 years slower than in the IAS. For example, if you become a Joint Secretary in Government of India, which is equivalent to Secretary here, and you are in IAS, the other services will qualify for that only 2 years later. And also, generally, pay scales are a little higher. So we used to have 2 additional papers which used to be called higher papers at that time. And those who qualified for the interview, and for convenience sake I am using the word interview, personality test. At that time, generally speaking, those who qualified for IAS and IFS also qualified for the other services. Whereas people who qualified for the other services might not have qualified for IAS, IFS. The number was much smaller. And therefore, the interview for IAS and IFS used to be held only in Delhi, whereas interviews for the other services used to be held in places like Madras. In those days it is called Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. And in Delhi, even when we went, the interview board consisted of all members of the UPSC and chaired by the chairman of the UPSC. It used to have at least one expert member, sometimes more than one, who was a specialist in some area. I remember KPS Menon was there when my brother was appearing. Mr. Raghavan, who was ambassador in China, was there when I was there. Like that. So the interview board did not change. In other words, if the interview of IAS went on for a month, it didn't probably go on for a month at that time. Anyway, even if it did, the board was fixed. Fixed means it was not changing. So you knew who are all in the board. You can anticipate who is going to interview you. And then there were complaints that there was kind of a fixing. That people, though at that level, influence peddling is very little, but we are all human beings, so you cannot say that nobody will be totally free from all kinds of influences. So there were allegations that some people who had influences also realized this, and nobody ever bothered to ring us up. Please, my candidate is coming, so and so is my son or my nephew or from my constituency, help him or so on. So UPSC has been able to maintain a certain degree of reputation for impartiality and honesty. How courts get influenced and all that, and certainly Supreme Court of India is also respected highly by people of India for its basic integrity. Everybody can make mistakes. Supreme Court can make mistake, Prime Minister can make mistake, UPSC can make mistake, everybody can make mistake. But we are all human beings, we make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. So one of the things which happened when the passing the interview was not made compulsory was to make the marks in the interview the same as the mark for one paper. So interview is just like one paper. So how does it matter? It matters. It matters because interview takes place after your mains examination. And people who are called for the interview are the best. And what makes a difference ultimately, therefore, in 99% cases, is how you perform at the interview. The assessment is wrong. And then You are assessed by a particular team of people in a particular situation, in the way in which you are answering certain sets of questions. In half an hour, obviously they cannot ask you everything that you need to know. What happened was that after Kothari Commission came, they decided that there should be only one examination, civil service examination, for all services. But then the number of applicants was so large, so they had to screen out through an easier process of the prelims. So that is how the prelims was introduced, so that the number is reduced, the basic qualification in terms of graduation and the age and all that you can write. But the mains examination and the interviews are open only to a certain number of people. And that number is not fixed. That depends on the vacancies available. Vacancies multiplied by a quotient. I think it is 2 point something. That is the number. If 100 vacancies are there, 200 something candidates will be called for interview. And say 400 something candidates will be writing the examination, mains examination. Like that. There is a certain level of screening at that stage. Now, after the mains examination, when the people are called for the test, personality test, it is presumed that all those who are coming for the personality test have a certain level of intellectual capability, which I mentioned at the beginning, is required for a proper assessment of every situation in which you will be placed. Now, we have to make a selection out of that. You have somebody who has taken maths as a subject, somebody has taken physics, somebody has taken history, somebody has taken political science, like that, or psychology or whatever else. How do you compare all these people? Earlier, there used to be some kind of a formula for putting them all on the same ground. So, that was one of the important reasons why every committee has recommended that the age limit should be brought down. But politically, it's not a very welcome thing. So political leaders always ensure that the age limit is raised, and the number of it is fashionable and quite popular to say that you get 2 more chances, 3 more chances, and all that. And all efforts to reduce the number of chances, or to ensure that only people of a certain caliber are able to get through, have failed. And that is why a lot of people keep on trying, like, what is it, Scottish king. You keep, or like the spider, keep trying again and again and again until you succeed. Until you master the technique of writing examination and qualify. That there should be a clear assessment of mental caliber. It's so that people who don't have that caliber, how many times they may try, will not be able to qualify. Something which has been resisted, which has been ensured that doesn't happen. And so uh, you can't say that everybody who gets into the service is the best. Of course, one thing we can all remember is that you will not be you after you spend 1 year in a training institution, whether at Missouri or at Hyderabad or at Nagpur or somewhere else. Wherever your training institution is of the service, after 1 year of training, you will be a different person. And after 10 years, you will be different. That is why, in fact, when there were different papers, there was a lot of demand that there should be only one pay scale for IAS, IPS, everybody. Though that was not agreed to, because as they always say that IAS has got an upper hand and all that. Whatever. Now, there is greater justification because there is a same common examination, and the last man who gets into the IAS and the first man who goes into some other service may be separated by 1 mark. You don't know. But 10 years later, you may be a different person. Because in 10 years, what kind of exposure you get, what kind of experiences you go through makes a big difference. If all the time you are only doing one type of work, your development, you may become an expert in that type of work, but in every other field, in every other dimension of your personality, you may be lacking. In the IAS, for example, the advantage is that an IAS man is a jack of all trades. He may not be an expert in anything, but he has had some exposure to everything. In Government of India, I was in the Commerce Ministry, I was in the IT, I was in the environment, I was in civil aviation. In the state, I was Urban Development Commissioner, I was Collector, Industrial Development, all kinds of things. Marketing, Agriculture Marketing Board, various things. So that kind of a wide range of exposure you don't get in many. So when it comes to a general assessment, that makes a big difference. And in our interaction also, I have found that there's a big difference. For example, customs. For people who have spent all their lives in customs, they are only concerned about how to protect so that there is no, I'm talking of the honest people, how to protect so that there is no leakage. It's another matter that you plug one leakage here and then another hole opens up on the other side. So it often made a big difference when we encountered someone who has also worked in other departments. Because then you look at things from a different perspective. Then you see that it doesn't matter if some people are making profits, but the larger interests of the country are served, country in general, economy in general gain. Like that, in every field that kind of problem is there. Now there is no definite answer as to what is the kind of right, the extent of expertise in a particular field and the exposure, the need for exposure. In fact, in every field you find that you may get recruited as an IT man or a subject specialist in a bank, but as you get promoted to higher level, management level, you may have to deal with all kinds of things, administrative things and business things and so many things. So at that stage, your ability to manage becomes more important than your technical expertise. So it is difficult to say what is the right balance for these things. However, What I was saying was that the interview systems have evolved over a period of time. Now, I mentioned earlier that in the early days or in our time, one could predict who is going to interview us. Today, you cannot predict. Not even the chairman of UPSC knows who is going to come before him for interview next day, for that day. So there is no question of any prior arrangement. I mean, we have heard stories about people getting 96% and all that by through some recommendation and somebody saying that you come and recite this poem and we'll give you marks and all that kind of thing. Those kind of things don't happen now. Because of the system. Now the system is that now instead of one board, there are about 8 boards, 8 or 9, I don't know, depending upon the vacancies. 8 boards, for example. Each board is chaired by a member of the Public Service Commission, Union Public Service. So I was president of the board. And each chairman is assisted by 4 other members. Not members of UPSC, but 2 persons are from the civil service and 2 persons are from the academic world. Of the 2 persons from the civil service, 2 would have been IAS, either a secretary to government or chief secretary in a state, and the second person would have reached the top level in some other service like foreign service or police service or some other income tax or whatever. And the 2 from the academic world, one will be from the humanities side, one will be from science and technology. So that is how a certain balance is maintained in the composition of the board. Now this board changes every Monday. So someone who is an expert today will not be the expert next week. And you don't know exactly, it's very difficult to kind of match this. And even if you match, you don't know before which board you are going to come. Because all that is known is that on 30th January, X number of people are going to be interviewed in the forenoon. That list is there. Now, some assistant at random takes out from that, say normally half an hour is slotted, so 10 to 1, 6 candidates in the morning session, and put those names on a slip of paper, put inside a blank envelope, close it, and like that 8 envelopes will be there placed before the chairman in the morning. Nobody knows what is inside which envelope. So the chairman just writes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So depending upon your luck, you will be before the interview board 1, interview board 8. Depending upon and all people are not the same. Some people are little more liberal, considerate. Some people are very strict. I was considered to be one of the more liberal types. You know, as Jobin said, I am generally a simple person. I know how in difficult times we have all passed through, and you also come through. It should be nice. But nobody gets 96% now. And it's only rare cases where it can go up to 80%. Generally, 75% is the kind of maximum which you can get. In exceptional case, I think in my whole tenure there, I might have given 80% to maybe one person or something like that. And this is the composition, this is how it is changed, this is how it is ensured that you don't know who is going to be interviewed by whom. Now, the second thing which is done is that at the end of every session, before the people rise, the marks are not only written down, but everybody puts his signature. Everybody sees it. Every member sees it. You can't change the numbers later on. And the number, each person doesn't give separate marks. It is discussed after the interview, and a common figure is arrived at. I mean, there can be some kind of differences. Some people say that 60%, somebody may say 70%. And that can be narrowed down to 65% or 60% man agreeing on 70%, whatever. So at that level, there is not much of what they call in Hindi hera-pheri, not much of hangi-pangi or whatever. It's quite fair. Fair doesn't mean that the assessment is always constant. So, not only the example of Tendulkar which I gave to you, you may be at your best one day, you may not be at your best next day. The questions may be also different. In half an hour's time, how many questions can be asked? Maybe the questions which are asked are things for which you are prepared and you know very well. Somebody else has been asked questions for which they have no answers. Of course, nobody expects that you should be able to answer every question. I mean, you are not a walking encyclopedia in that sense. You may know a lot of things, you may not know some things. But anyone who doesn't know anything is certainly useless. So you don't expect such people to qualify. So, one or two questions not being able to answer, not knowing, one can understand. But the majority of questions or too many questions, if your response is that, well, I don't know, then it shows that you are not up to it. So there is hardly any possibility of manipulation in this. It is reasonably fair. But that fairness depends on so many other factors. That is why in 1 year somebody gets 75%, next year he may get only 60%. Oh, this board is not done its job properly. It's not that. My colleagues who had been secretaries, who were toppers in their time in some subject in the university, thought that this is a time to show their knowledge, expertise of certain subjects, and to keep on asking questions about those things. Especially if they see that, oh, you have done political science, okay, I'll ask questions on political science. You have done economics, I'll ask questions on economics. I know economics well. But then, the important thing to remember is what I said at the beginning, you are being tested not for your knowledge of that subject. You may be a great expert in mathematics or physics, but that doesn't make you fit to be a good collector. It's an altogether different kind of quality which is required, personality which is required to discharge those functions. Most importantly, you need to have a lot of common sense. You should be able to assess people, you should be able to assess the situation, so many things. So, that is why, in spite of all these precautions, quite often the toppers don't go to the top of the service. Because there is an assessment at different levels from Joint Secretary onwards, Joint Secretary in Government of India onwards, the assessment starts. Only those who are empanelled can become a Joint Secretary in the Government of India. If there are 100 IAS officers, not more than 60 generally get empaneled to be joint secretaries. So, if somebody is a joint secretary in Government of India, you can say that it's reasonably okay. Not that everybody will be good, but reasonably okay. And many people who don't go to Delhi, the majority of them, my brother also didn't go. Of course, he was there in the Cochin Port Trust, posting here in Government of India. But a lot of people who don't go may tell you that, oh, I didn't want to go. But the fact is that they don't get a posting. They can't get a posting because they don't qualify. They are not in the panel. Only those who are in the panel can get joint secretary. And that is reduced to half of that when you reach the level of additional secretary. And still further when you reach the level of secretary. So if you get into IAS, it doesn't mean that you will become a secretary in Government of India, even if your age permits, even if you are still in service and your batchmates become secretary, unless you have been good. And at that stage, good is not enough. You have to be near perfect, because even one failure in one post can ruin your whole reputation and whole career. In the state, you may become chief secretary, you may become additional chief secretary and all that, but not in Government of India. So the matter, even in Government of India, there are about 150 or so secretary level officers, but of that, hardly a dozen or less than 20 are important posts. So who gets that important post depends to some extent political, but consideration, but large extent depends on your merit. Even if you are politically acceptable, if you are an idiot, they will not make you secretary finance or secretary home or anything. So important portfolios will be given to bright people who have been successful in their career in managing situations. In that, when there are two bright people, one may be more politically acceptable. That's possible, for one reason or the other. But not that an idiot will be preferred over a brilliant man. So that's how it goes. Therefore, the interviews are not actually tests for your depth and measuring the depth of your knowledge in a particular subject. This is the difference between the personality test of the civil services and the viva of, say, PhD. Because these days in some of the universities you can pay and get a PhD, and you may not know what is inside your thesis. Somebody else has written it for you. That's different. But even however good quality it may be, I mean, the thesis, I mean, the PhD, the examination is to see whether you are really good in that particular subject. Whereas the examination, the personality test for the civil services is to see whether you are fit to hold the job. That's a big difference. Though, I mean, I keep going even now once in a while, once or twice a year. Earlier I used to go more often to Delhi. So whenever I go on work to UPSC, I meet chairman and at least some members whom I know. And I've been asking whether there is any change in the examination in the interview system. And they have all told me that there is basically no change. Every Monday, there is when the new board comes, there is a meeting of all the expert members, where the chairman and members brief them of how they should conduct themselves. So one of the things which they mention at that time is the same thing which I mentioned, that it is not the depth of knowledge of a subject which is to be measured, but the general suitability for the job. In spite of that, somebody or other might ask you questions about the subject you had in the college or for your graduate studies, or the subject which you have taken for the examination. I mean, you don't stop anyone from asking questions. Generally brief. This is how it is. The only questions which definitely people are told not to ask are questions about religion and politics. It is not to say that nobody can ask, if you are a Hindu, what is the meaning of Bhagavad Gita, this shloka or this thing, or what basic lessons you learn from Bhagavad Gita. Or if you are a Muslim, what is there in Quran, or if you are a Christian, what is there in... That's possible. But you certainly will not ask what is your view about Babri Masjid demolition. There it becomes controversial. There you are not, they won't ask you that question. Similarly, you may be asked what are the arguments for and against the Citizenship Amendment Act. But not that, what do you think about it? Is it right? Is it wrong? Because then you have to express a view which could be considered political. So there is a difference, therefore, between expressing your view with a religious or political tinge and objectively analyzing a situation. If by mistake, normally nobody will ask that question. If by mistake anybody asks you, then you said, I have only analyzed this objectively and I have no political view, and therefore I would not like to commit myself to any particular stand. This is a politically correct way of saying. And therefore, it's not an examination of your subject, and it is a general understanding of the situation around you that matters. Now, what do you mean by the situation around you? The situation around you, you should know by having intellectual inquisitiveness. Nobody can say that I studied only literature and therefore I don't know anything about IT. Then you are not fit for this job. You go and teach English literature. For this job, you should know about technology trends. You should know where the technology is going, how government should respond to these changes. Nobody can say that I don't know, I don't understand economics, so I don't know anything about the economy or the country or the global economy. But again, not for this job. So you should know something about every subject. You may not know everything about every subject, but something you should know. That is what you call the general knowledge. Little knowledge, a bit of a knowledge about, awareness about everything. Economy, politics, environment, climate change, murder demolition, or Palestine agreement, impeachment, Brexit, this, that, Kashmir, BRI, whatever. Or somebody can ask you about cricket, somebody can ask you about under-19 cricket or World Cup cricket, who have won and who has a chance of winning. Is Virat Kohli the right person to lead? Is Rahul the right wicket keeper? You can give your view. But don't. Now, there comes another question. Your view may not necessarily be the view of the person who is asking you. One thing is that the person may be trying to pose a different stand to provoke you. But genuinely also he may have a different view. There the importance is not to switch to please the other person who is asked questions, but at the same time you should not appear to be quarrelsome man, cantankerous, who is ready to fight out and all that kind of thing. So you should know where to draw the line for the right kind of balance. I can't tell you exactly in every situation what should be your answer. You have to remember that every answer has to be balanced, politically correct. Now, living in Kerala, you have no idea about the outlook of people in North India, the outlook of people in Delhi. Here, I remember somebody coming and talking to me all about leftist views about this, that and all that. But everybody else is a rightist. And the whole eulogization of Fidel Castro and Ayatollah Khomeini and all that was enough to put off all those people. So you should be politically correct. Don't go by what you read in the Panorama, Madhurabhumi and other Malayalam papers or channels and all that. But there will be, it is also not that everybody will be a saffronite there, a BJP sympathizer or a Modi Bhakt. There will be people who are critical of what is going on, who are genuine secular-minded people or consider themselves secular. So people may have different views. So what is important is that you don't have to show your political color even if you have any political inclination. Don't show it. Be politically correct and neither leaning this side nor that side. Be objective. And don't give an impression to anybody that you have a particularly fixed view. That is true of politics, that is true of religion, that is true of almost everything. Correct, objective. And equally important is that whatever you say, you can say something, but you should be able to follow it up with cogent arguments. It should be it's not that you not the impression that so-and-so is bad and something is bad, America is bad, imperialism is bad. You have to have, socialism is bad. You have to have some good reasons. Better, of course, not to say anything is bad or it's the ultimate or anything so. But whatever you say, you should be able to assess it. And since you are going for the interview, let me also tell you that you should take your time to listen properly to the question and not be in a hurry to answer. Of course, quite often people say that a lot of Malayalis are not having enough confidence, self-confidence, and so the very appearance is a kind of a diffident kind of a thing, and so you should show you have self-confidence. It's fine. That is also that's a point well taken. But self-confidence also should not reach the level of giving the impression of arrogance. So it's again a fine point where you draw. You don't cross that limit. But so you should listen to the question and try to answer. Don't try to beat about the bush. In Parliament and Assembly, quite often ministers give answer which is altogether different from the question. That is their way of handling something. Some very clever ministers, I have actually, doesn't he know? It's not that he doesn't know. The way he answers is that the answer has nothing to do with the question. He takes you to some other world. That is a smart, but that will not take you very far in this interview. And don't try to be too smart. Many people will say, I guided this discussion this way, that way, and all that. It's small, up to a point, may be able to some extent, you may be able to divert. By and large, you should always have some respect for the people who are sitting on the other side. They are not idiots. They are also seen many people like you. And your smartness is something which they also understand. They may not tell you, but they also understand. This guy is trying to be too smart. So be straightforward. And so listen to the question, answer as far as possible to the question precisely, not everything else which is not relevant. And you should be able to say whatever you are saying, you should be able to support it with cogent arguments, good reasoning. So that is it. So what do you do? Well, those who are just beginning, one whole year to go before the exam and the interview will be there for you. You have a lot of time to build up your knowledge. Don't think that you will be able to suddenly learn everything that you are required to learn after the examination is over when you are called for interview. That is a gradual process. You build up your knowledge as you go along. Many of these may not be of any use ultimately in the interview. It doesn't matter what is of use, what is of not much use, you can't predict. You should know what is going on in politics, what is the geography. You should know the atlas, you should know the globe, you should know what are the climate changes happening, what kind of international pressures are, players are playing up, how the economy is doing, Indian economy, global economy, petroleum economy. There are umpteen things which you need to know. So all that, without your knowing, you will get to know if you regularly do some reading of newspapers and magazines in addition to your subject reading. A lot of people read Hindu, which I think is a good paper. Though of course these days many people say that it is also a little bit politically slandered and all that, but still it's got fairly good features. It's not important to know who raped whom and how many people got murdered at Kodathai or somewhere else. Doesn't matter. Don't waste your time on reading up all that kind of things. How and what is the motivation of some crime, or doesn't matter. But what matters are the international things. It matters when Donald Trump gets impeached, when this guy gets becomes Prime Minister of UK or President of France, how the Muslims are treated in China, so many things, or what is happening in IAS, so many things. So and it is not enough to read, but you should use your brains and assess what is happening. So that is one way of developing analytical skills of your own. And when you do that, gradually the reasoning gets embedded in your mind. Without your realizing, you gradually learn how to analyze things. One or two magazines, one Indian magazine and one international magazine will do. I often recommend the London Economist as a weekly for you to read. Of course, London Economist often has so much to read that you take many days to read. So you have to be selective what you read and what you don't read. And they occasionally give articles about technology, about environment, about political things and all that. In-depth articles. So what you read and you don't read, depending upon the time available to you, is something for you to decide. So one newspaper, definitely one English newspaper and one Indian magazine and one international magazine on a regular basis will be a good thing to do, read. And if you're, those of you are, especially those of you who are taking Malayalam as an optional, should read Malayalam papers and magazines and all that. I have no idea of advising you because I never took Malayalam as an option. I don't know, in those days probably it was not there. There is no shortcut to hard work. There is no replacement for discipline. Discipline in the way you use your time, the way you order your life. So you must have discipline, you must learn to work hard, you must utilize the time available to you. Time management is very important. Some of you may be working, some of you may not be working. Either way, you should know how to manage your time. And see, you have an examination, work backwards. Today, between today and that examination, how much time is there, how much time you should devote to this subject, that subject, or this or that. So accordingly, you ration out time for various things which you are doing every day. And until the exams are over, there is hardly any holiday. So work hard and do well in the examination, do well in the interviews. So I have everything what I could ask for, dream about when I was your age, but I don't know how to use it. Because there is nothing to use, there is nowhere to go. That's life. Before I'm becoming very philosophical at the conclusion of this little talk. You know, there is a character called Narayana the Brahman, because an equivalent in English also, who is pushing up a boulder up the hill all the whole day, and then the evening he lets it down. That is life. And yes, but one thing I can tell you, you should learn to be happy with what you have. You can always think of somebody else who has got more than you. But as you look around, you will find that the majority of people whom you have known, who have been your friends, don't have what you have. We don't think about what others don't have. We only think about what others have, and what we don't have. We should learn to be satisfied. And of course, interview you have to impress the board. But generally speaking, don't go by what other people think of you. I mean, as a young man or woman, you may like to dress well and all that. It's all right. You may like to impress the opposite sex. Gender, that is all understandable. At our age, it really doesn't matter. Even if I dress very smartly, nobody is going to. I mean, the other day we were going for a marriage. So my wife asked me, what are you going to wear? I said, You are the only person who bothers about what I wear, so whatever you tell me, I'll wear. I mean, it doesn't matter whether I wear a pajama or pants or bundas or whatever. So that is at my age. But generally speaking, learn to be satisfied with what you have. Learn to be happy with what you have. Be contented with what you have. Having a lot of money is not everything in life. We know a lot of people. You will also get to know. So do well in life. Do well in the examination, in the interview, and may God bless you.